All right, so it looks like we're live, everyone. Welcome this afternoon, Friday afternoon, to the Hangout on Air on Innovation and Education. My name is Drew Perkins, as you can see from my lower third down here. I'm with Perkins Educational Consulting, and that's my Twitter feed, or my Twitter handle. I'm excited to have this conversation and discussion and hope that we have some folks that are joining in that will join in with their voice and using that Q&A app and add their thinking, add their comments, add their questions for the panel as we discuss and talk about innovation in education. You can also, if the Q&A app is not something that you're comfortable with or it's not working, as Google adds new features and drops new features and things like that, you're welcome to use my Twitter handle there, dperkinsed. Right down there, and tweet to me if you have comments or questions, and I'll try to bring those in as well. So with that said, I'd like to go ahead and give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their background and what they're bringing to the conversation. So going, looks like left to right in my film strip down here, we're going to start with Courtney O'Connell. So Courtney, tell us about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney O'Connell. Thank you, Drew, for pulling this awesome panel together. Excited to talk about innovation and education today. A little bit about my background. Currently, I work for Eric Qualman, who is an author and international speaker on social media and digital reputation and digital trends. And I work mainly with him to build out, we're building out a digital leadership institute, so doing some curriculum design and kind of creating a way for us to take some of the messaging around digital reputation, digital leadership, and get it out to, we're working with a lot of institutions to get out to students, which will be exciting, and also obviously businesses as well. Prior to working for Eric, though, I did work in higher education, mainly at Rutgers University for about 5 years, doing leadership education, leadership development, and have always been passionate about innovation in education, not just from the tech standpoint, but just systematically and a lot of the different ways that we can bring innovation to education. So we have a TEDx talk in 2013 on that, and then have written some posts for HuffPost EDU on that as well. So that's kind of my background.
Okay, great. And Courtney also has, if you go to the blog post at perkinsed.blogspot.com, or just go to perkinsed.com and click on blog, you can find it. The event page here details about what's going on in the with this blog or with this Hangout. So there's a link there. She teaches an online course, called the 5 Habits of Educators. And if you go to a link there, there's I think a $20 off promo. So if you're interested in that class, jump in there and jump on there. So great. Don, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Don Wettrick, and I am just outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, at a school called Noblesville. And there I teach a couple classes on innovation, and we're doing a lot of really cool new things. We update weekly on our YouTube channel, and I'm sure I'll talk about that. And then I also, the other part of the time there is that I'm also kind of the innovation coach there at the high school, and that's a unique position because Noblesville is taking a lot of unique approaches to education, and I'm proud to be working there.
Okay. And Don neglected in his humility to talk about his new book called Pure Genius. I'll show you the cover there. I've read it on my Kindle. Yeah, looks familiar, right?
Yeah.
You just put that together last week and published it, right?
Something like that. No, actually, that's a funny story. No, I was honored and humbled to have some offers, but I ended up publishing it with Dave Burgess because he knew a thing or two about putting together a really good book. And yeah, it's been a fun journey, and it's opened up some other unique avenues and talking and having dialogue with a lot of educators and superintendents about wanting to kind of change things up and take innovation really seriously at the school level.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks for that. So last, but certainly not least here, is Terry Hike, who is with TeachThought.com. And so let's give Terry a chance to talk about himself and explain all the children in the background.
Yeah, I am. My name is Terry Hike. I'm a former middle and high school English teacher, And as an English teacher, I became really interested in digital media. I thought that was kind of cool, kind of tracing the arc of human expression from the spoken word to poetry and fiction, and then this little explosion with digital media and technology. So I started blogging a little bit about that, and now 5 years later, or 6 years later, I guess, here I am. I'm really interested in thinking about teaching and learning and kind of reimagining what we think of as education in a modern connected world.
Okay, great. So those folks, again, I was just tweeting out here. If you have joined us online here and hit that tweet and want to use that Q&A app, please do to add your questions, add your thoughts. It's something new that I haven't explored and had much experience with here on Google Hangouts on air, but they should show up on my screen. If that does not work, or if you would like to tweet at me and tweet me those questions, please do so at that right down there, D. Perkins Ed. So as we get started thinking about innovation, that's obviously something that we want to define and think about. I like how Sir Ken Robinson kind of talks about creativity, which then leads to innovation, sort of the idea that that creativity is original ideas that have value, and then innovation is sort of the application of that. So let's think about how do we define innovation in education specifically. So with that in mind, Courtney, I'll give you the opportunity to start there, and then we can go across or make this some sort of an organic conversation.
Sure. So I think that this is actually something I talk a lot about when I go talk with educators about innovation, the habits, and that kind of stuff, because I do think that innovation is misperceived a lot in terms of thinking that has to be something really flashy and something with a lot of production value or technology, and often, it can, but I think in my mind, innovation truly, when it's boiled down to it, is just challenging the status quo. So I talk a lot about innovative educators being those that are looking at what's been done and they want to do something different. Things are constantly changing, and whether it be new technology being introduced or student population coming in is different than the year before or years before. And unfortunately, a lot of the systems and the delivery methods and things like that are the same as they've been, for the last few decades. And so the innovative educator defines, innovation, or the way I define innovation is someone that is going to look at the status quo, what's always been done, and how can we then change it to better engage the student population that we see now, or use new technologies to better engage, or whatever it is. So I think it's pretty simple. Simply said, not simply implemented, but that's really what I think it boils down to.
Okay, Don or Terry, you all have any thoughts that you want to add to that, or different takes on it?
Yeah,
I think it's go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay, I think it's something as simple as being as transparent as you can. A lot of times people complain about students today, and students today are great. And it's really up to a lot of educators to prove people otherwise. And actually, now I'm going to do shameless plugs in the book. I talk about that in the book in the 4 roles of a new innovative educator. And they're a project manager, because we have a lot of project-based learning out there, a public relations agent, travel agent, and venture capitalist. And as their public relations agent, and which is why I take to social media so often, we're demonstrating our knowledge. Because we're making that leap from being consumers to producers. It's really nice and it's cute if you can watch a lot of YouTube videos, but it's better if you can produce your YouTube videos. Same thing with the role of venture capitalist and travel agent. It's kind of my job to get my students out of a traditional environment and to go places and see great innovation happening. A couple weeks ago, we just got back from our Northern California trip, where we were privileged enough to go and spend some time with developers at Google and Facebook. Matter of fact, a big special thanks, because I know Bryce Anderson right now at Facebook is watching. But seeing these things, getting out cross-pollinating and being as transparent as possible. Because when other people see that innovation is not a risk, it's actually something that should be embraced, then you start changing a lot of people's opinions.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned is different roles, and what I, really think about and doing some reading, some of the words that resonate me with is that connectivism and kinetic thinking of how are you resourceful, how do you as a teacher and then get students to do things that are reaching out, building networks, whether that's traveling in person or doing it differently. How do you tackle that problem and getting our kids to think differently about leveraging resources outside of the school? So, Terry, I'll give you an opportunity because I know you were going to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in general, education's not really built for innovation. I mean, I guess nothing, or I don't know. I just think that education is not really built to be innovated, and so it almost has to come more naturally or unnaturally, I guess, through disruption. And I think one of the reasons that it's kind of lagging behind comparing to other industries, if you want to think of education as an industry, is because it's not only is it not built for not only is it not built for the innovation, but it's also the disruption hasn't gone far enough. The innovation hasn't gone far enough. So when we think of innovation, we think of how can we innovate our lessons, or innovate assessment, or how can we innovate collaboration. But we're not thinking of it at broader levels, like at a curriculum level, at a learning model level, how districts and schools are set up, how schools and communities interact. If we want to think about innovation, I think we've been thinking about innovation a bit too simply. And so I think that's probably a big challenge. We're not being ambitious enough, I guess.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I had that I wanted to raise up. Like, what is holding us back? And I think some of it is the archaic structures, certainly. And there's a blog post that Terry posted on teachthought.com about teaching content. Are we teaching content, or should we be teaching thought? Or I think I butchered the title exactly. But as I talk with teachers, and one of the things that I see when I work with teachers in schools around the country is varying degrees of concern about what accountability versus skills. And if we're looking at trying to create our ideal graduates, then what is that ideal graduate, and how do we get at it differently? So what are the things that hold us back from your all's perspective? What are the things that we need to get at differently that make it really, really hard to innovate as an educator?
Well, real quick, I think that I've got an echo here. I think that the way that we measure performance is.
You sound fine to us.
Yeah, I can jump in. Some of the things that are. Wow, there's a big echo. Some of the things that are holding us back are. Is anybody getting a lot of feedback?
No, I'm fine.
I'm hearing it.
Are you? Yeah. There's one of those.
Actually.
Let me see
if you can mute. Drew, if you can mute your microphone, I think that's the problem. Things that are holding us back, I think, is this perceived risk that you're not doing anything if you're innovating. Sometimes I talk about the fact that Kung Fu Panda is one of my favorite movies because there's nothing on the Dragon Scrolls, and that's innovation. It's figuring things out for yourself. And so when I first offered this class of mine, it was so vague. To some people's opinion, it was so vague. I had some people going, well, what do you teach? What are you talking at them about? And I'm like, well, I'm not. It's an open forum that we definitely learn innovation, and we learn about how to collaborate and how to effectively brainstorm. But essentially, I'm not teaching at them, and that was the big shift. But it took a gutsy administration at a high school to say, yeah, we're going to let you do a class that is a bit like the Seinfeld show. Seinfeld was a show about nothing. If they're going to put me in charge of a class that on the description is, this class is what you make of it, you are going to be expected to do projects of which you choose because you already have an interest, and you have a driving question, and you have a thirst for knowledge. So how many schools are that daring? Not as many, but quite frankly, that's why I love some of the Twitter chats and some of the really big genius hour people and the 20% time people out there, is that they're showing that it's not as much of a risk as they thought. And on the flip side, it's also not as perfect as we thought. I do a weekly update every week on YouTube, because I get a lot of people think that everything is perfectly running smoothly, and it's not. We have trained our students to be really good at sitting down and quietly awaiting instruction. And so in the first couple of weeks, heck, the first 6 weeks, my students didn't know how to react to, you are free to work on and find your own opportunities. And that was hard for them to make that shift, because they're good A-B students that wait for, like, I want to tell you what you want to hear, Mr. Wettrick, so what do you want to hear? And it was a hard thing to get past. So a little bit of culture on the student end that needs some work, and a little bit of culture on the administrative side that needs work.
Courtney, and let me know if, as I unmute here, see if that echo comes back.
Yeah, I think that
Okay, how about this new rule? Everybody, because I do, mute your if you can mute your mics when you're not talking, because we're going to get some serious feedback.
Agreed. That's a good call. Yeah, no, first of all, it's so great just to hear both of your thoughts, Terry and Don. Just hearing all of what you were saying before, I was nodding. My head was almost hurting because I was nodding so much in agreement. So it's excellent to hear other educators out there that are really going up against some of these issues and going for it. Because I think that's where, that's my biggest thing, is the disruption has got to come from educators. And so it's awesome to connect with other innovators out there. I think that, one of the things, there's a wide variety of there's something, someone's unmuted or something. I hear feedback. Sorry, thanks. Okay. So one of the things that I think is a huge, there's a lot of things that are unfortunately standing in the way of innovation, but I think one of the big things that I talk a lot about is failure. There is not a lot of room for failure in education, and failure is seen as something that is shameful, and obviously people can't go forward, or they fail a class. It's a really, really bad thing. And obviously there needs to be a level of accountability, and students need to learn, and same thing with educators. But if you look at the startup community, they celebrate failure, and if you read any books on innovation, there's an absolute need for failure in order for innovation to occur. And so I think one of the big systematic issues, or if you look 10,000 feet in the air at education, one of the big things that we face is that issue with, especially today, with all of these kind of prescribed things that students need to learn. And I talk to a lot of teachers and educators that feel, especially in K through 12, that feel like they can't try new things. So kudos to your boss, Don, for allowing for something really cool and special to happen at your school, because I think a lot of folks feel like, I'd love to try new ideas, but if I do and it doesn't work and my students don't make the grade, then I'm the one in trouble. And I think that's going to be really hard for us if we have that system in place where we're not allowing for our teachers to try new things and fail fast and fail forward, as Eric, my boss, talks a lot about in his books with digital tech. But you see that a lot in the startup community, this fail fast, fail forward, and unfortunately we don't really embrace that in education.
That's funny you say that. We about 7 students and I just 2 days ago went to a Fail Fest in Indianapolis, where it was entrepreneurs of all sorts and all walks of life, and everybody there gets excited about when they screw up, because it's meaningful and it's a way not to do things. And ironically enough, I just put out today's the YouTube channel is called NHS Innovation Class, and that's exactly what it was. Is that the innovative educator model and the path to entrepreneurship mirror one another almost exactly, and it's that trial and error, and that whole feeling of you're gonna mess up, and that's cool. And one of my students just coined the term, we're failure junkies. We get excited when we're like, that didn't work at all, and it was awesome. And we move on, and there's no, I'm not trying to say that I don't assign grades, because I still do. They still have things to get at. But I think the biggest difference is that if they have something that blows up in their face, that's not a failure. If they don't try or they never get off the ground, then that is. So the only failure is not doing anything, or not showing progress to want to get better. So fundamental difference.
So as we think about that, and how we attack that, because I agree, being a teacher in a school district in a setting that was not conducive to innovating and thinking differently, that is a real frustration. It was a frustration of mine as a teacher, 15 years in the classroom, and not every classroom, and many of those classrooms were not anywhere near that sort of environment. So how do we change that? How do we change those mindsets? It's great Don has a boss who is willing to allow those risks and take chances, but that's not the case in so many schools and districts. And where should we attack that? Should we attack that at the district level? Should that be a national policy decision? I've often thought that if parents really understood what education should look like, they would pressure politicians to make changes very, very quickly. So where should we attack that problem, and what's the way to do that?
Well, I think if we want to think about innovation and we want to think about design, I think it's important to think about innovating the purpose of education. So let's go all the way to the top. Instead of innovating existing paradigms, let's look at, well, why learn? Why should people learn? What's the point of school? And really clarifying that, because really that everything else comes backwards from that. I don't know that we can ever really evaluate the quality of schools without understanding what we're supposed to be doing. We can't really say, yeah, we're doing it well, unless we say, yeah, everybody knows what we're doing. In most cases in the United States, it's proficiency of academic standards. That's the driving force. And so that ends up, innovation has to come in and around the Common Core standards, or any academic standards for that matter. So I would think that innovation would have to start at the top. Why do we go to school? Why do people learn? What's the point of learning? Do we want to talk about citizenship? Do we want to talk about academics? Is it college and career prep? Because to me, K through 12 isn't about the reason to go to K through 12 is not to get ready for college, and college is not to get ready to go get a job. And that kind of flawed thinking has led education to where it is right now. So earlier when I said that education isn't built for innovation, that's kind of part of what I've meant, is that in terms of the learning model, when you teach and learn in an outcomes-based learning environment where the content is already established from the beginning, it's hard to create self-directed learners. It's hard to create these opportunities that are really open-ended and creative, because education is not built to recognize and honor that type of learning. So we can do a lot of really great things in the classroom, but it's not going to move the needle when it comes to the test scores. And trust me, if you're wanting to innovate and you're wanting to integrate technology and you're wanting to do all these great things, but the test scores aren't improving, the first thing that's going to go is the idea of innovation. When the screws start getting turned, at the end of the day, superintendents and principals and teachers and on down the line are paid. Their goal of education, as they see it, is to produce proficiency of the standards. So if we're going to talk about innovation, I really think we need to start with those sorts of broad conversations. And you mentioned parents. I think it absolutely has to come from them. I think one of the reasons education has gotten to where it's the point that it's at is because it's retreated into its own, I guess, jargon and into its own policies and practices, and it's completely pushed parents and communities out of the classroom to the point where they don't even feel like parents in communities don't feel empowered to make a difference. It's, I can help you get your homework done, and I'll make sure you get good grades, and I'll put pressure on you that way. But in terms of, what do you understand and why do you understand it, that kind of stuff, that's crazy talk.
So I'm going to come at it from the exact opposite level, not just to be a contrarian, but only from my experience. I think it should start from the bottom, and that is there's a lot of teachers that I think will be able to showcase what innovation looks like and take away that risk. Early adopters pave the way for a lot of people. Rarely does it ever come from the top, and I don't think that people at the administrative level, for a lot of reasons, and they sometimes feel pressure for the old way of doing things. So when it starts off at the bottom, I think it automatically has an advantage. And back again to what I said about transparency, if you're putting stuff out there, like when a school does well, and locally when moms and dads and aunts and uncles think that school is doing great, that's nice. But when you start really, really, really showcasing what you're doing, then you start having some change at a bigger level. And so when you have people like, Joy Kerr and AJ Giuliani and some of these people that are like really leading the charge for like Genius Hour and 20% Time, which is by no means that they have the monopoly on innovation, but it's those people that want to showcase things and then they take away that risk. And so superintendents and everybody else is like, they see the exact opposite. Instead of it seeing like hey, this is a risk we might, they see what happens on the public relations level. It drives me nuts when teachers say, well, the only thing the media covers is the bad news. Have you picked up a phone? Have you tweeted at a reporter? They are dying for good educational news. That's gold to them. They don't want to cover the latest rape allegation or shooting allegation or all these other things. They don't. Yes, that's news and it moves. But when a kid is starting to write his own app, when they're starting to have a help desk at a library for elderly people, or they're working with developers at Google, that's news and that's important. And then real change happens, and everybody else mysteriously goes along with it because it just all of a sudden it's no longer controversial. This seems to make sense.
Yeah, and as I think about it, I think about it as a cultural piece. It seems to me that so many schools are really wrapped up in what I call a culture of achievement. So everything's about scores and data, finding scores, getting kids to know what scores they have on certain things, how do we close those gaps, knowing those kids, and really all the conversation revolves around that. We go into teacher meetings, PLCs, professional learning community meetings, and they're about data, they're about disaggregating the data, and teachers sit in there and say, how long is this going to take, what do I have to turn in? And there's not a real focus on what I call a culture of teaching and learning. And so if we're not improving the teaching and learning, then the rest of it to me seems, other than getting buses there and turning the lights on and safety that are all important, but those logistical mechanical things aside, if we're not improving the teaching and learning, I think that any of the stuff that we're doing is secondary. And so how do we get that culture changed? Are our teacher prep programs doing a good job of that? It doesn't seem to me. If there were, I wouldn't have a job as I work around the country and work with teachers who sometimes have just come out of teacher prep programs, and we do a project-based learning workshop, and they're like, wow, this is mind-blowing. Like, this shouldn't be mind-blowing. You should have had this kind of thinking, having kids make things, create things like apps and anything. I mean, creating doesn't have to be on such a grand scale, but kids should be making things and creating things, producing things, and teachers and students should be using inquiry to get them there. But that's such a big shift. So I just wonder about our teacher prep programs and how we might innovate there. And I know there are some out there. So anybody have any other thoughts on that? Courtney, I see you just unmuted yourself.
I'm getting ready. Yes, I like this topic. Well, first of all, it's so great in the last conversation kind of piece. It was great to hear just two. I think both have value, and so it's great to hear passionate kind of thoughts on both sides. And I think both sides, I had thoughts going on both sides. But I think as it relates to teacher prep, when I think about it from a grand scheme of things, I do think that for the longest time we have been able to prepare teachers in a certain way, and it worked. But unfortunately, fortunately, really, but unfortunately for teacher prep programs, our society is rapidly evolving. I mean, there's just the data. I think what you know about technology today, and then 5 years from now, 85% of that will be irrelevant 5 years from now. Like, that's how quickly things are evolving. And so now really is the time where innovation has to be a core principle of teaching educators, whereas before maybe it didn't really need to be. Maybe it was about student development theory, and it was about some of these other pieces and curriculum design and all of that. But I do think that now we've gotten to a place where we need our educators to be prepared as innovators, so that when they enter the workforce, that they are thinking about the way they're developing a lesson plan, or the way that they're approaching a conversation with the student, that they're coming at that with knowing some basic having some basic knowledge and expertise around innovation, innovative problem solving, creativity, things like that. And so I do think that that could be a really great thing. And I also think that it's a great opportunity for us to bridge and go across disciplines. So those that are teaching in educator prep programs have expertise in particular areas. But we might want to connect with our folks in the MBA programs, or those that are in other programs that are teaching innovation or creativity, and might have an opportunity there. Our entrepreneur or educators or faculty members at colleges and universities could teach innovation in a way for educators that could be really unique and different, and prepare educators in some new ways. So I think there are some opportunities there for partnerships to really broaden our teacher prep programs and get our teachers prepared to be innovators.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just making some notes because I definitely I'm pulling some interesting pieces and parts about that. And so it brings to mind some questions for me, and I know that as a side note, we've got some folks that are viewing, and please, by all means, use the Q&A app or tweet to me down here at dperkinsed and add your voice. We'd love to hear from you all and get some comments and some questions into this conversation from outside just the panel here. But I was going through some papers, and I saw something from about 1991, so almost 25 years ago, that looked like it was something that could have been pulled from Ed Reform, a Twitter Ed Reform hashtag thing. It was like, how do we change the mindsets from a feudalist traditional mindset? It was all of the things that we're saying. And so over this past 25 years, how much progress have we made, if any progress? And some might say we've regressed in some sense. So what does innovation look like? So get you all to sort of think about and give some ideas of what have you seen that you thought was a really innovative approach, and also what do you think innovation, or what do you think education will look like in 25 years from now? If we think back to that artifact that I found 25 years ago, and it seems like we're at least at best, not made much progress as far as changing mindsets and things like that. I'll share an example of something that I thought was a really innovative school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's called ACE Leadership Academy. It's actually for kids who are really struggling with school, many of them sort of dropouts, and what I found interesting about it, I'm big into project-based learning, do lots of trainings and workshops in that, but most of those are with schools, just basically exclusively schools that are looking to do projects in school, which is a wonderful shift, and it's a wonderful piece. But what I really thought was innovative and interesting about this is they were doing projects as schools. So their course catalog did not include any, like, you didn't go pick your math class, your English class, your electives, or whatever, right? You picked your sort of morning project and your afternoon project, and your content, your learning was in there, embedded in there. And so they were doing real world work. They were building things. ACE stands for Architecture, Construction, Engineering, so clearly a focus on building and the construction trades. So I thought that was a really innovative way to attack the questions and the innovation that we're trying to get at. Now, there are some concerns about how well they're covering content, and as Terry, I think, noted, is at some point somebody's going to come calling for the accountability, and whether they'll be able to withstand that. They've replicated it in I think a tech school and a health leadership school. But what are some innovative practices and things that you all have seen, and or what do you think education is going to look like in 25 years? And we do have a question from the panel, so at some point I'd like to get to that too. So who wants to jump on those big questions?
I'll start. What do I think it's going to look like? I think that we're going to, and this is me being hopeless optimistic, I think that we're going to start working away from the understanding that being a good test taker is not an employable skill. I hate the term when people throw around factory model education, because it's become so cliche that I think it's lost its meaning. But when we start taking a look at having kids look at marketable skills and pairing them up with their passions and talents, that I think we can sprinkle in a lot of liberal arts education, but then also have little mini schools within schools so they can start working on tasks that they need or want to work on. That they start having. I think we're on the days of mentorships and apprenticeships again. I had the luxury of talking to a writer, and I interviewed him not too long ago. His name is Daniel Pink, and we were talking about the fact that even though it's over 150 years old, kind of the concept, maybe our students spend part of the day learning from professionals and learning outside the school, that maybe we're going to have some more freedom to attract our students to work with people that are great. I know in my innovation class, you're expected to find outside sources. You're expected to work with outside experts, and it can't be your dad or your dad's buddies. But I'm hoping that's something that's going to catch on. The thought of me being an expert in my room is laughable, because the things that we're discovering all the time in my innovation class are well beyond my scope, and I want that to happen. I want to be a person that connects to or have them find great mentors, because I can't teach them 1/3 of the things that they're starting to look into. But I do think that one of the things that I think is the most essential skill that needs to be looked at now and in 25 years from now is that, and I mean this is from the heart, is that we train our kids to actively look to solve problems. The wealthiest people in the world solve problems. That's it. And so when I sign off everything with opportunities are everywhere, I mean that. I do not want my students to be dependent on the government to help them find a job. It's their job. And they're actively looking out there of like, what needs to be innovated? What needs to be improved? And once you put on that different kind of rose-colored glasses of, I'm out there looking to see what needs to be improved, I think that you make that transformation. And I'm really hoping that the schools are going to take a look at using America's greatest untapped resources, our students' thoughts and ideas, as a means to get us out of our unbelievably bad economy and to really overhaul education.
All right. Terry, Courtney?
Yeah, I have to admit I don't have much faith in schools to work this problem out. I think that these sorts of solutions are going to come from the outside. I think, and I hope, through the expertise and the experience of teachers. I don't know if you want to think of it as teacherpreneurs, or if we want to think of, I don't know. I'm just thinking over the last 25 years, you mentioned 1991. You can go all the way back to Dewey and some of his ideas on education, and it doesn't look much different than stuff you might read on a blog today. These are the same sorts of conversations that we've been having for, close to 100 years. And the idea that school is an industrialized learning model in general in most schools. Now, of course, there are outliers and exceptions. and there's some really compelling exceptions. But the idea that most public education is industrialized and mechanized, and it is. And so I don't have a whole lot of faith that schools are going to be awakened and go, oh, we need to be innovative and forward-thinking and progressive. I think what's going to happen is as that sort of thing starts to happen, if it does happen in pockets, then I don't know if these large districts will become smaller, if huge schools will become smaller, if big campuses will gather in a bunch of smaller schools individually, kind of like a mini K through 12 university. There will have to be some sort of change, because as schools and districts are built now, they're not built to realize that sort of innovation. It's just not the way they think. It's not in their language. It's just not the way schools think. And at the end of the day, let's say you mentioned project-based learning in schools, a project as school. So if you imagine experiential learning, place-based education, project-based learning, blended learning, if you imagine all these, a lot of these sound fantastic, but right now they're measured. We decide if they're good or bad, and we report them on the news as progressing or not based on their test score, and in large part, not fully, but in large part on their test score. So if we say, hey, this kid gained a lot of wisdom, and he made these great connections, and he worked underneath this mentor, and he had this cool apprenticeship, and he developed and designed all these nice things, but at the end of the day, it's got to be moving the needle on the test score. And I'm not necessarily anti-test. I think standardized tests can have a role in education. But again, just beating a dead horse, education as it exists right now is not built to be innovative. It resists that innovation.
I totally disagree. And here's why. This is why you have to be transparent. It's up to us. And is it come from administration? I agree with you. It's not. It's coming from the teachers showcasing what awesomeness is. And I tell you why I do think it's going to change is because the reactionary schools that don't want to feel like they're left behind, i.e. the people that don't want to always feel like their test scores are really low, once you get this ball rolling and you showcase great stories, I was just reading Simon Sinek's book that you can talk about broad generalities and it doesn't change people's opinion. You talk about one student who's really doing things and he wants on board. So if more teachers are, hey, shining a light on this is what's great and this is what's awesome about education, and we don't rely on the story of the school scores, then we start making some real changes. Because the comparison of 25 years ago, 6 years ago, the iPhone came out. The speed in which we communicate now is faster and faster than ever, and YouTube has changed everything. Network TV is also starting to take a back seat. So now a person can become an overnight celebrity, and my student can get their message out there faster than ever. And then all of a sudden, that success makes schools think, maybe there's something here, and you can start winning hearts and minds over a lot faster than you used to.
So are you, Don? Go ahead, Terry.
Well, I was just going to say, so if we have those communication tools and those transparency and visibility tools like phones and tablets and iPads and YouTube, and we have that visibility, then why hasn't the change happened?
It has. I think of like what Eric Schettinger helped do. I see more and more students' talent being showcased, and I think that we're at the cusp of it. We're just right at the beginning. And with each passing new day, I see Genius Hour hashtags. I see more stuff being put out there, and Education Nation on NBC and Making a Difference and all these other things. Little by little, they're not going to rely on the pat on the back of this school had a really good test score, but they're going to start showcasing the stories of a student using a 3D printer to get a kid that has a prosthetic leg to get a part fixed. They're going to use stories about a kid who did a social media campaign to get some bill passed, to get an ordinance passed. These things are taking off. And yeah, I know social media can also be the source of bullying. There's always some good, some bad. But little by little, all these media pieces bring about positive change. I don't see us ever going backward. I see us moving forward at a faster pace than ever.
So you're, Don, you're sort of saying there's almost like an Arab Spring feel, like we're on the cusp of that, of the groundswell of greatness being promoted and publicized. And so if that's the case, then how do we foster that and get more of that and speed that curve up, kind of thing? And
Get teachers to quit being so aw shucks and humble. If you're okay, so I gotta get credit due. I met a guy.
That comes from a guy from Indiana, right? Aw shucks, right?
Yeah. I met Alan November once, and this was like 3 years ago, and he's like, "Hey, I'm really liking what you and your students are doing. I'm sure I can't believe I haven't come across it." I'm like, "Well, I live in Indianapolis, and you live in Boston. I hate the Patriots and go Colts." And he says, "No, I can't believe we haven't come across your stuff on Twitter." And I said, "Oh my gosh, Twitter's awful. I'm not a Kardashian." And I'm like, "I don't want to brag about stuff." And he says, No, you have it all wrong, Don. What Twitter is it's a teacher's lounge where you exchange ideas. And my gosh, how much is Twitter trending in the educational community? By leaps and bounds. All of a sudden, blogging is common. Doing podcasts is common. And once you open that floodgate, and once you allow the free information to start flowing, you're not going to go to the newspaper and say such and such is a bad school because they're lower test scores. That is starting to go. It's not gone yet, but those stories of negativity have the potential of being totally outshone by the teachers that are saying, "Hey, I don't know what you guys are talking about. My test score has not been great, but look at what we can produce." We talk about LeBron James going pro. What about our kids that are going pro in every other area? Because they're innovating, because they're leading the way. And you start showcasing work like that. Don't keep it under a bushel. Put it out there. Call your local newspaper. Put it on YouTube. Do whatever you can, because that's when you're going to start winning hearts and minds.
And so, Courtney, I want to get to you, but I also, so while you're thinking and unmuting and things, I want to acknowledge a couple of things that are out here. Ellen Sears put in a couple comments using the Q&A app, and anybody else who's viewing, because I know we have some other viewers, Twitter as well, tweet me if the Q&A app isn't working. But Ellen says a couple things here. Innovation is new and different, so is an innovative teacher always trying new and different? Are they innovative in the what or how? Some old things are still effective, not everything good is new. And then she also makes another, what I think is a really good point. So accountability dictates direction of innovation at a school district. Then the element of failure needed for innovation is not recognized, which we've kind of talked about a little bit, that failing fast, and Courtney speaks to that a little bit as well. So the reason there isn't a correlation maybe that there really isn't the environment needed for innovation, which again is that culture of achievement. And she puts one more comment here that I think is actually really insightful, that education is innovative. The institution of schools are what's restrictive. So with those things in mind, Courtney, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Yeah, that's a lot. So I think that I think that Don is right in that it really, and that's why I was so excited to work for someone like Eric, because I do, before I was working for him, I was teaching students how to blog. And I think that's such an important lesson, and I saw their eyes light up at the idea that, and I think that students, because they grew up as a digital native, that they already know how to do this. And there's such a difference between giving a student a digital voice and teaching them about digital voice versus being on a social network. And so I think that there's something really exciting about the work that you're doing, Don, as well as other educators, about giving students that voice and getting them excited at the ability, because if you look at innovators as problem solvers and you try to train and teach students to be these problem solvers and leave with that skill, and I can tell you working in higher ed that that's what they do need in order to get that job, because I'm right there with them, right when they're graduating and looking for those jobs, and the ones that are successful are not necessarily straight A students or this or that. It's the best problem solvers because they are solving the problem of getting a job. And I think that as it relates to social media and digital tools, what gets me so excited is that now we've, I hate this phrase, but leveled the playing field a little bit, because you had to be a senior level person to create change back 20, 30 years ago. But now you can create change with a Kickstarter account, a Twitter account, and this and that. And that's exciting. And I think that's one really big piece of where we can go with students, at least in education. as for the comments about, educators, I come back with like getting their voice out there and changing the storyline. I'm with you. I totally agree. My background before education was marketing, so my bachelor's degree is in marketing. So I'm like one of those people that's like, why are we not changing the story? Why can't we control this? I've found, though, that a lot of educators and a lot of those that are attracted to this field, I'm not trying to say, generalize, but I've found in a lot of the conversations is that there is a little bit of like, that's not what I'm about, like I just want to do what's right for the students and things like that. And so I do think it is a little bit of a paradigm shift, and we'll have to keep chipping away. And it's good that there are folks like Don and other people out there that are showing that you don't have to do it with this like fame and fortune in mind. It's more about changing the dialogue about education. And so I think if we can begin to have the conversation with educators about, sharing your stories are really important, and this is why, because eventually it will come back to help our students. I think that's going to be where we need to really focus if we're going to try to change that storyline.
Yeah, and Ellen, just as you were saying that, Courtney had submitted, and I think it's at that question, and I don't think Terry's disagreeing that there are great things happening, and that perhaps that social media and whatever is, can we create that groundswell that potentially could be a game changer. But Ellen says, yeah, there's a lot out there, but how do we encourage teachers to curate? And like you said, Courtney, like how do we get our teachers, and how do we create that, whether it's from the teachers or from the students or both? Like if that is a potentially huge change agent, how do we continue that to ramp up? I mean, will it continue just naturally, or is there something that we need to be doing to get that message out there that will reverse that flow, kind of as an undertow around that flow of accountability and testing, and no race to the top and no child left behind? All of those things are data driven and test driven and accountability driven, and teachers are in a lot of cases scared to death of those things, and change is really hard because of those. So how do we get, and is it possible in our school setting system? Is our school as it is it possible that we take our system, our public education system as it is, as a whole, and in 25 years from now, that could possibly be something that was what we're all talking about? Or does it need to be done outside of our public education system? Nobody wants to
saw it more as
that.
I saw it more as an Arab Spring, like you're talking about. The more relaxed schools are, you know what? The biggest opiate in the world is trust. So one thing I really enjoyed about watching Eric Schettinger and his school take off is that he's, in the beginnings of some of the adoption of Twitter, he told his students, okay, I want you to be on social media, and if something is great going on in class, tweet it out. Now that was contrary to so many other people who said, put away your cell phones. Cell phones have no place in the classroom. Oh my gosh, it's a computer in your pocket. Of course it has a place. And Eric said, I trust you. And what did it do? It paid off, because all of a sudden he branded his school from being, and no offense to New Milford High School, it was in a place where it's not high, it's not upper middle class by any means. And so he started branding a school of, hey, when you see things that are successful, I want to see it. And if you see things that bother you, I want to hear about it. Almost, you just never say never, but they never got any bad tweets. The students said, wait a second, you trust me? And it worked. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, New Milford became branded. And CBS and NBC were doing national things there. So when they were doing a science experiment or some sort of thing that was above average, they were covering it there because they knew they were doing great stuff, because they wanted to, like you said, that Arab Spring. The more voices of people saying the school is awesome, then the more they were treated like, okay, it must be so. If it's one principal saying how great their school is, that's one thing. If it's 2,200 kids saying, hey, this place rocks, we're doing real significant things here, then change happened.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I think the only thing that I thought of as you were talking, Drew, was just before was I think there is some role that our associations might be able to play in helping with this. I think that, I'm a big, obviously, leadership development, professional development person, and I think, our associations tend to play a pretty big role in conference design and things like that. And so I think if there is a way for, obviously, like we've said before, Twitter becomes this like big teacher lounge, and those that are on Twitter are gaining a lot of insight and exciting stories and things like that. But I think the more that we can incorporate in our professional development programming the opportunity to learn the tools in a safe environment where you're feeling like, yes, I'm learning this and I can use this, and also kind of learn some of these different elements, whether it be some storytelling or marketing or things like that, and again in a way that feels good and connects to our end goal, which is student success. I think that there might be some opportunities there to spread the love a little bit, because obviously there's going to be folks that, like everyone on this panel, that are ready and excited to, get into some of that. But I think the more that our associations might be able to get that into more professional development opportunities and reach more folks, because they have such a huge reach, that might be a really good opportunity.
Okay. So as we wrap up here, and we're coming in on 4:30, we've had some things popping in here, and I'm going to give Ellen one last voice here as she's adding things here. She says, funny, I was going to say that informed is the ammunition a teacher can use to support innovative practice, but they have to step up and be acknowledgeable. With great power comes great responsibility. Data isn't the problem. Not knowing how to use is. And Don, I think you make a really great point about trust. I was recently reflecting on my teaching career. Like I said, I was 15 years in the classroom and a number of different states. And one of the things that I very early on in my career did that I had actually kind of forgotten about was the I had my kids, we were in middle school, call in. We had a classroom phone that could dial out long distance, and we were watching and talking about some policy things in government and social studies as a social studies teacher, and I had them call into C-SPAN, and they were live on the air. And I think probably anybody like that would be. It was a I think it was an 8th grader, and we had talked about something. It was really sort of off the cuff, and I trusted him to be live on the air and had a really interesting perspective and conversation. Which the moral of the story is not to say how great that was. It was an interesting experience, but to me, one of the morals of the story is that I've taken from all of you is like, just go, do, like push, like really push the limits and get after it. Now it's easy to say when you're not afraid to lose your job, which is certainly something very reasonable to be concerned about. But how do we get the teachers to really embrace that and to push and be disruptive forces? And that's something that we're all wrestling with. I talked with a teacher today. She said, well, I can't, and this is not being disruptive, but she said, well, we really want to take our kids on a field trip, but we didn't have any money, which I wrote that down because, Don, you said, oh, we just returned from our Northern California trip, and they just wanted to go to a nursing home, like, nearby. So, like, how do we get teachers to really tackle those problems? And I see it all the time in workshops that I run. Teachers say, well, how do I do that? Like, okay, there's this Google machine, like pick it up and run with it, right? So how do we get teachers to be innovative, and how do we get them to think differently about work?
One, you said something is near and dear to my heart, and that is just start somewhere. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Even when we took the trip to Northern California, we got really creative because we had to go on such small notice that it was going to possibly be pricey. So we did, I can't tell you the lengths we went to make that trip cheaper. I think, one, it starts with the educator, though, have a willingness to try different things. One of my favorite quotes from education came from my dad. I wasn't always in education. First 3 years out of college, I was not in education, and my parents paid for every cent of my education. I appreciated it, but everybody in my family is also a teacher, and gosh darn it, I'm not going to be a teacher because I want to be different. And so after my third year, hey, I hated to admit it, and I told my dad, I'm like, hey, just want to let you know that thank you for 4 years, and I to work somewhat. I'm going to go back and be a teacher. And by the way, I'm not asking for money, Dad, but this is what I want to do. And I thought he was going to be mad, but he took a deep breath, and he kind of paused, and he says, Donnie, I don't care if you go and teach the next 20 years, but do not teach 1 year 20 times. And that has always stuck with me. Every year is different. Every year is a new challenge. I throw out what didn't work, and I try to embrace and enhance what did. And I think that's the message to a lot of educators is that just because you did it that way year after year doesn't mean you have to. And I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you are doing stuff that it works, great. But can you enhance it? Can you twist it around? Can you tweak it a little bit? That's what innovation is. It's not that you can code. It's not that you're good on, whatever. It's that you try things different, you have a willingness to fail, and you keep pushing forward.
Well, as we, like I said, as we're wrapping up here, and I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to kind of give final thought and talk about, again, things, how to get in touch with them and websites and things like that, things that are important to them. I'd like to remind everybody that I'll have a hangout in December around project-based learning and advanced placement. So if you're interested in that, check out my blog, and you can find all of that stuff at perkinsed.com. And please do tweet at me at dperkinsed. And so, and I think Courtney mentioned, we're just going to have to keep chipping away at this. I love the idea of sort of an Arab Spring, and as I think about how we get that momentum, speed that momentum up, because it certainly needs to be in a lot of cases. I think parents and students are huge change agents in that, and almost every teacher is a parent, so I include them in that. So I think, like I said to a teacher today, she said we wanted to go on a field trip, and how do we find funding? I said, well, if it's important enough to the students, can't they do that? Can they engage in that? And you guide them and facilitate them, because if you're trying to solve problems, let's solve problems, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to give everybody a chance to sort of wrap up and give final thoughts and things like that. We'll start with Courtney and then go across to Don and then Terry.
Well, thanks, Drew, for having me on this panel. This has been enlightening for a Friday afternoon. Absolutely enjoyed hearing everyone's thoughts. I think that, at the end of the day, what I say to any audience I talk to of educators talking about innovation is that if you care about students, you need to care about innovation at this point in the game, I think. And kind of going back to my original point of, it doesn't have to be as scary or as flashy as we think it is. It really truly is problem solving. It's looking at, just like Don had said, it's looking at what you did the year before and trying to improve upon and challenge that status quo so that we don't get complacent and just do what's always been done. And what I talk a lot about is the habits of innovative educators. So it's really, just like getting healthy. If you go into the gym and try and do 2 hours a day every single day and only eat healthy, you're going to get exhausted and you're going to hate it. But if you actually just take on these little, minor changes to the habits you already have, you might actually enjoy it and get excited about it and see results. And innovation is actually the same way. It's the people that are most innovative. It's what they do in every interaction with the student. It's how they approach every, problem that they come across, or every time they get to go to plan a lesson plan or whatever it is. They have certain habits that they're using that's making them innovative. And so I think with that being said, the message hopefully is, yes, it's important to care about innovation, because if we care about students, we need to care about it. And two, it doesn't have to be that hard. It really is just, minor tweaks to the way we approach our work, and we can all kind of get there.
All right, great. Don?
Final thoughts. Don't believe a word I say. Just look at my students' work. It's all really what it boils down to. When I hear that there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of talk of innovation and these buzzwords, but look at the output. I highly encourage you to take a look at our YouTube site if you feel so inclined. If you go to NHS Innovation Class, the student blog channel is innovationnhs.weebly.com. You can get up on mine at theinnovationteacher.com. But again, I'm wanting to champion and showcase my student work, because my words aren't going to persuade as much as actual output. And that's if there's one thing, and if I've beaten it like a drum, I'm sorry. But teachers, be transparent, showcase, be a champion, be a public relations agent for your kids. If they're doing great things, the world deserves to see it. I want to see it. I'll promote it. I'll tweet the heck out of it. I love showcasing awesome student work.
All right, great. Terry? Oh, Terry, I think you're on mute.
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
All right. I don't know. I guess if I could leave with one final thought, it would be to just have some sort of thought about what we're innovating towards as an industry. Innovation right now exists, is the way I see it. It's kind of within the shell. The shell is, if you imagine a school district, and then the schools, and then the principals, and the teams, and the teachers, and the curriculum, all within this sort of this globe. Right now, the innovation is happening within that globe, and what I'm interested in seeing is, as we innovate, what else is possible? What else? How can we escape that sort of snow globe that is the current structure of education? How can we kind of get outside that and utilize the teacher expertise and the technology and a lot of the great practices and talents, I guess you could say, of that exist in education right now? So, yeah, I'm just really interested to see what we're innovating towards, rather than just innovation for the sake of innovation.
Yeah, very good point. So thanks to everybody who did join us, and anybody who will be watching this in the archived version on YouTube. Again, it'll be on the YouTube channel. If you go to, if you want to learn more or didn't catch all the website and links and that kind of thing, check out perkinsed.com and just go over to the right side and click on the blog. And if you go to the blog, you'll see this event, and you can see all kinds of links and things that Courtney and Don, and a link to Teach Thought for Terry. And do check out Don's book. I've read it. It's very good. Maybe I should join in Courtney's class. Maybe I should get me a 20% discount or a $20 discount, right? So again, thanks so much to everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.